This is an online video presentation entitled A Snapshot of Canadian Railroad History. It's being completed as part of the Teaching Online program through the University of Calgary. It's an example of how to build a fully narrated, animated online lesson, and by extension, a digital artifact and an excellent addition to any student's e-portfolio. One way of examining Canadian railroad history is from a thematic standpoint. This video looks at Confederation and the railroad, railroad construction, builders and barons, economic and industrial implications, and Canadian National Railroad in art and culture. The Canadian Railway. An overview. The development of steam-powered railways in the 19th century revolutionized transportation in Canada and was integral to the very act of nation building. Railways played an integral role in the process of industrialization, opening up new markets and tying regions together, while at the same time creating a demand for resources and technology. The construction of transcontinental railways such as the Canadian Pacific Railway opened up settlement in the West and played an important role in the expansion of Confederation. However, railways had a divisive effect as well, as the public alternately praised and criticized the involvement of governments in railway construction and the extent of government subsidies to railway companies. Confederation and the railroad. By the time of Confederation in 1867, the new federal government would seriously look at creating a national railway from coast to coast to bring new settlers and goods into Rupert's Land and help stave off America from expanding its borders. The Canadian Pacific Railway even became a condition for British Columbia's entry into Confederation in 1871. However, a scandal related to its construction brought down the government of the first Canadian Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald. The Railway Act was first passed in the Legislature of Canada in 1851. It was designed to set the ground rules about how railroads could be built and maintained. This was to prevent fly-by-night railway companies from cutting corners on construction and maintenance and ensure the safety of railway builders and passengers. Railroad construction, builders and barons. It took 10 years of surveying to determine the best route across Canada. Survey crews crossed the country looking for the cheapest and most direct way for the tracks to be laid. Survey crews lived in tents as they crossed mountains and prairies and were away from their families for months or years. The work was dangerous, the weather often very cold, and there was very little food. Many surveyors got frostbite or scurvy, were attacked by grizzly bears, died in fires, or drowned. Railroad construction, Chinese labor. Between 1880 and 1885, about 15,000 Chinese laborers were brought into Canada from China and California to work on the British Columbia section of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Many of these immigrants were hoping this job would help them escape from crushing levels of poverty in China. The Chinese often had the most dangerous jobs in the railway, carrying heavy rocks or planting unstable explosives. They were also paid about 30 to 50% less than other workers. They lived in unsafe canvas tents that offered poor protection from the elements, including sudden rock slides in the Rockies. Many of these workers died from diseases like smallpox and cholera, or were killed in work-related accidents. Railroad construction, the barons. To help fund the building of the railroad, John A. Macdonald found a private group called the Canadian Pacific Railway, or CPR for short, to be a partner. The estimated cost for building the line was $100 million. The CPR would pay for the railroad construction and then own the railroad. William Van Horn was hired by the CPR to oversee the job. Sir William Cornelius Van Horne. Van Horne succeeded George Stephen as president of the CPR in 1888. He regarded the Canadian Pacific as a transportation and communications system. At his insistence, the company developed the telegraph service and entered the express business. Donald Alexander Smith was also an important railroad financier. Smith was an enthusiastic supporter of the Canadian Pacific Railway, and his financial backing was essential to the progress. Economic and industrial implications of the Canadian Railroad. The effects of railways on emerging urban centres was crucial and dramatic in Canada. Toronto's dominant position in south-central Ontario was clearly established by its rail connections. It benefited from its connections with the Great Western and its central place on the Grand Trunk Railroad, neither of which it had done much to help build. It also tapped the northern hinterland via the Ontario, Simcoe, and Huron Railway. The railways played an integral role in the process of industrialization, tying together and opening up new markets while at the same time creating a demand for fuel, iron and steel, locomotives, and rolling stock. The pioneer wood-burning locomotives required great amounts of fuel, and wooding up stations were required at regular intervals along the line. The Canadian Railway in Art and Culture. The Last Spike is a 1971 Canadian non-fiction book by Pierre Berton describing the construction and completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway between 1881 and 1885. It is a sequel to Berton's 1970 book, The National Dream. Both books form the basis for the TV miniseries, The National Dream. The book won the 1971 Governor General's Award for English Language Non-Fiction. The Canadian Railroad Trilogy is a song written, composed, and performed by Canadian singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot that describes the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway. This song was commissioned from Lightfoot by the CBC for a special broadcast on January 1, 1967, to start Canada's centennial year. According to Lightfoot, Pierre Berton said to him, "You know, Gord, you said as much in that song as I said in my book." Berton was referring to his two books about the building of the railway across Canada, The National Dream and The Last Spike. In 2001, Gordon Lightfoot's Canadian Railroad Trilogy was honored as one of the Canadian Masterworks by the Audiovisual Preservation Trust of Canada. The following references and resources were used in the design and production of a snapshot of Canadian Railroad history. Teacher and student project resources. The following web links have been selected as an excellent starting point for teachers and students hoping to teach and design projects related to Canadian history. Again, thank you for watching a snapshot of Canadian Railroad history.